Title of my latest essay, call it a rant, call it what you will, is Americans are in no way exceptional. We must do everything in our power as citizens of this nation to separate ourselves from an attempt to negate this pompous and idiotic notion of American exceptionalism. You will notice that I did not say this great nation. There are no great nations. The concept of the nation state is by its very nature contrary to anything even remotely resembling greatness. This nation in particular was founded by an elite group of wealthy white landowners whose methodologies included murder, genocide, broken treaties, importation of slave labor, and outright thievery. All the references to the Constitution and the framers of that moldy, outdated, worthless document by the media and whatever spineless puppets are currently being held up before the public as possible proponents of political change are an insult to the intelligence of anyone with eyes, ears, and even a moderate amount of common sense. The fact of the matter is that these so-called founding fathers were nothing more than a loosely associated cooperative of wealthy white men who hatched a scheme to erect themselves as the new 1%, rather than hand over the bulk of their wealth and ill-gotten gains to the 1% in England, to whom they had sworn allegiance and were formerly beholden. There are no noble ideals here which will stand up to the light of truth. The American Revolution was nothing more than the efforts of a few greedy men to wrest the spoils of genocide from the hands of other greedy men who were in the unfortunate position of being thousands of miles away. This is why when I hear buffoons like Cornel West speak about American exceptionalism, I am left nauseous. I call him simply by his given name because I will not give credence to whatever letters, position, or accolades he attempts to use as evidence of an intellect he does not possess. Cornel West is a prime example of how those whose education was overseen by vetted and ingrained institutions are so rooted and indoctrinated into a false paradigm that they literally cannot see the forest for the trees. Education and intellect are not parallel. Some of the greatest minds of recent generations have been stunted and ultimately stagnated by the very forums through which they were supposed to have been nurtured. The half-black moron who was elected president in 2008 is yet another example of the illusion of superior mental faculty that is perpetrated by the ridiculous, snobbish, entrenched, old money network that poses itself and passes itself off as a venue for the cognitive enrichment of youth. Barack Obama majored in constitutional law. His entire education was nothing more than an indoctrination into the workings of the most powerful tool ever conceived for the protection of inherited wealth since the Magna Carta. I am, of course, referring to the United States Constitution. The reward he was offered for the utter abandonment of any morals or principles he might have had was that he and his descendants would be counted among the privileged few, the 1%. Alas, there has finally appeared a chink in the armor of the dominion of the few over the vast multitudes. There's an emerging global community aided by the very technology which was meant to further control and suppress us. Keep the internet free, for it will be a tool in our liberation. No longer can we be isolated by race, religion, or ideology. We now have a window into each other's lives and cultures. The end result is that people are beginning to realize the one thing that most of us have in common. 99% of us are being subjugated, disenfranchised, and debilitated by a few thousand families that control the wealth, power, and influence of this entire planet. This is not about countries, ethnicities, or religion. This is about the many finally communicating with each other, realizing that we have the power, and demanding to live in a world where all men are not just created equal, but live as equals.